professor of history at University of Wisconsin-Stout and the author of Duty Beyond the Battlefield, African-American Soldiers Fight for Racial Uplift, Citizenship, and Manhood, 1870 to 1920. And finally, I'm Colonel Ray Kimball. I have the privilege of serving as the Chief of Faculty Development at the U.S. Military Academy, and I'm the author of the Guides to Army Mentoring. So what we really hope you understand today as we get into this topic of character development is that the character crisis is very real, and it is a very major problem for our institutions. It's not optional, and dealing with it is not busy work. It requires a focused and disciplined effort to inspire and educate our people in the language and the practices of character. There are many different routes we can take to attack this problem, but what matters is that we make it a priority and that we take action now. So with that, let me hand it over to Colonel K.O. Bailey.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. That was incredible, Ray. Appreciate that, and appreciate Dr. Donaldson and her participation on this panel. I look forward to learning from both of you as we have this conversation, and from the questions of the audience. Thanks for joining us. I look forward to learning from your questions, and happy to continue the conversation after this on this indispensable work. I'll begin with just a brief story of and intro to the paper. One of the examples that really have inspired and influenced me, being new to the Alabama area, and particularly here at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, I had the privilege to study about one of our heroes. And this is a story about when he was a young boy. His dad was serving as a professor of military study, science, and tactics at a small institution here in rural Alabama. During this time frame, he experienced what he called later in his life as the Night of the Klan. In protest to federal hiring practices, the terrorizing Ku Klux Klan marched through the streets to intimidate Black citizens and government authorities. Local Tuskegee officials instructed community members to stay indoors and turn off their lights so that they would not provoke Klan violence. In courageous defiance, the boy's dad, Benjamin Davis Sr., stood tall on his front porch in his army dressed white uniform with his young son, Benjamin Davis Jr., and family by his side. The only lights within miles were the flaming torches of the Klan and the unflinching lights of the Davis home. This harrowing experience was one of many which developed the character of young Benjamin. He went on to break many racial barriers, lead the famed Tuskegee Airmen through World War II, and courageously serve his nation in spite of tremendous persecutions and struggles. During my research, I thought, how do I better emulate the character examples of these two courageous warriors and so many other patriotic women and men who have and continue to serve our nation so valiantly? How do I more effectively develop moral character in the warriors I serve and lead? As I reflected on my service as a tactical leader, as a flight commander, squadron commander, group commander, many of my most cherished memories and experiences are from leading and serving with women and men of character and honor. Unfortunately, on the opposite spectrum, as I reflect on my experiences, many of the most challenging and difficult and heart-wrenching situations are those times I've had to deal as a commander with violations of our core values and with those that failed to uphold those values. and the time and the effort and the intensity and the disruption to the mission and to the morale of the organization that those situations created. It is my intent and hope that as we discuss today, that we will be inspired and empowered to lead others to remain proactively engaged in character and core value development. Dr. Donaldson, over to you.
Thank you, Colonel Bailey. I was truly inspired by your paper, and I wholeheartily endorse your argument that there is a character crisis, and that the military really does need to invest more into character development. I am going to look at this from a historical perspective. A part of my research in looking at African-American military service is how they utilize that service beyond their performance on the battlefield. So I'm just going to tell a story of a young man during the Spanish-American Cuban-Filipino conflict who was walking down the street in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he saw a young, this is a young Black soldier, a private in one of the Buffalo Soldier units. And he saw a young Black boy in rags in Chattanooga. And this is about 1899. And he stops and takes the young man into a clothing shop, and he purchases shoes and new clothes for the young man, and tells him that his outward appearance is a reflection of his character, and not just his character, but he represents his family when he's out in public and whatnot. And the idea behind that story goes into how African-American soldiers, when they utilize their service, they were always very cognizant of the fact that when they wore the uniform, they were never doing it by themselves. Like, it wasn't just their service, it was the service of the entire Black community. And so, for example, the title of my book, Duty Beyond the Battlefield, comes from a speech given by Sergeant Vance Marchbanks to a group of veterans in just outside of Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And in that speech, he is telling these former veterans, these former soldiers, that they have this duty, like beyond their service on the battlefield, in regards to uplifting their community, to being examples, and to stand on high character development. And so when we look at the importance of character in regards to just looking at military service, as well as, say, the long civil rights movement, figures such as Ben Davis Jr. Or Colonel Charles Young, the way that people looked up to them and admired them and emulated them and wanting to be like them in regards to how they reacted to strife and circumstances, is a primary reason why, focusing on outside character and outside service beyond the battlefield and looking at civilian interaction is important in regards to character development. And so I wholeheartedly support KO's argument that it is something that really needs some true investment. I would argue that it could use stronger interaction with civilian community uplift, right? So that taking a lesson from the Black veterans of the past in regards to instilling that warrior tradition in the belief and support of and the power of the uniform. So I'll stop there. Colonel Kimball, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Donaldson. Appreciate it. And just like Dr. Donaldson, I was blown away by Colonel Bailey's paper. I really appreciated the powerful argument in support of, as he says, the indispensability of character development. The piece that really resonated with me, building on Dr. Donaldson's comments, was the many different ways that that Kao pointed out that you can get at this problem, right? That this is not a silver bullet issue, and this is not a single solution. That there are many different ways to tailor your education and to tailor your approach to this to get at unique aspects of your organizational culture and how your organization functions. And so in that respect, I just wanted to share briefly a character development methodology that we've been using here at the U.S. Military Academy that we're very proud of, called Leader Challenge, just to give you a sense of different ways of getting at character development. And again, I want to emphasize, this is not the solution. This is not the only solution. You should think of this as a way. So leader challenges, simply put, are true stories told by the soldiers who experience them that don't have a clear right answer or an easy solution. So let me unpack that a little bit. We start with true stories. These are not written by committees. These are not made up. These are not, carefully crafted. And that means sometimes the stories don't necessarily cover everything the way you'd like. And certainly sometimes it means that they don't always end the way that you would like. But it's important that people understand that that is a true story. And part of the way that you get at that is by having that individual tell their own story on video. So you are seeing that person, you're seeing it in the person's face, they're experiencing it. And it has to involve a difficult decision that doesn't have an easy answer, that doesn't have a right answer, so that people can actually wrangle over this and discuss this. Because this is the important second piece of it. You can't just capture someone's story and show it and expect that that's going to make a difference. If you do that, the response is going to be something along the lines of, yeah, I watched the video. Yeah, cool story, bro. Changed my life. What time's lunch? When are we going for snacks? Instead, you need to get people engaging in conversation about that story. You need to get people to internalize it and understand it and really grapple with it. And so the Leader Challenge is designed to do exactly that. It's built to put people in small groups where those small groups are having conversations. And we're talking small groups here of 3 or 4 people sitting around a table. Right? Because even in a group this size on a panel, with I think we've got 16 people, 17 people in the room right now, you can hide in a group of 17. My students try to do it to me all the time. But when you're sitting there around a table with facing 3 or 4 other people, there's no hiding there. There's no keeping a low profile. You have to engage in that topic. So small groups is part of it. Providing structure to the conversations, giving suggested questions for dialogue is another piece of it. Helping people mix around and talk to one another and meet with different groups so that they're not just talking with the same people over and over again is another part of it. All of these are designed to help drive conversation around these stories so that people aren't just passive spectators of these stories, but they are actually actively engaging and understanding what these stories are all about, how the person felt, how they experienced it, and what are some lessons learned and ideas that can be taken away from that and applied to the very real imperative of character development. The last and most crucial piece of the Leader Challenge that I think makes everything else possible is the mindset of it. And so when we set up a Leader Challenge, we encourage people to engage with a learner mindset, not a judger mindset. And you may not be familiar with those terms, but I guarantee that you've experienced the judger mindset. The judger mindset says there is only one right answer to this character problem. And I know that right answer. And because I know that right answer, I'm going to make sure that every other person at this table agrees with me, because that's what you do with a right answer, right? You convince other people that this is the right answer. Well, that's not terribly helpful when you're having character conversations, when you're talking about things that have shades of gray and have difficult ways of internalizing and managing. So instead, we encourage people to grapple with a learner mindset, which says, yes, I have strong opinions on this. I have strong feelings on this. I'm a professional, but so does everybody else at this table. And there is something that I can learn from every other person at this table. And so when I come to this table, I'm going to come with a mindset to learn. I'm going to come with a mindset to hear and engage with folks. And we really feel that that mindset is absolutely crucial. So again, I hope you take that away as one model one way to get at character development. Colonel Bailey has some great examples in his paper talking about some immersion, some AR and VR tools, which again, I think are fantastic, and I really, really do want to see go forward. So what I want to do now is go ahead and move us into the Q&A portion. I do want to encourage our audience, please feel free to put questions in the chat, and we will definitely get to them as we talk. I do want to lead off with a question to Colonel Bailey. Why this topic? What hooked your interest on this and really kind of pulled you in and wanted and made you want to engage on this?
Outstanding. Thank you very much. And I really am looking forward to having a learner mindset and learning more about the Leader Challenge opportunities there, and if there's something we can employ with that at the officer training school in the future. So I hit on it briefly, but to me, this has always been an area of passion for me. Leadership development, character development, and how do we help our warriors become stronger morally, physically, and develop that resilience and hardiness of spirit so that we can more effectively execute the missions that our nation asks us to do. And to me, this was amplified during this last year at the Air War College, because I just stepped out of group command, and I dealt with a couple cases within my group where members of our group had committed horrific acts of violence against other members of the group. And to me, that was just completely earth-shattering, that these people that I had trusted and were willing to go to war with were hurting our battle buddies, our wingmen. And how do we do a better job of preventing, deterring these kind of things from happening, and people of this nature from serving in a position of trust, because they had the trust of our teammates and they had trust of their nation. And how do we better act? So that kind of propelled a lot of this. I think it's important that I specify that character in the paper. I refer to the term character as living our core values, upholding our core values. There's lots of different definitions of character that you can use. And the other caveat that is critical to understand is the biggest room in my house is the room for improvement. And better has no limit. And I don't profess to be the character expert, or I'm a student of character, and I'm working every day on the man in the mirror. So I think that those are a couple of good caveats important to throw out there.
I really love that. I really love especially that last one, that it's certainly hard to call yourself an expert on character. I think certainly instead you can talk about being someone who facilitates character development or facilitates ideas. So I think that is really, really well said. Dr. Donaldson, I wanted to ask you from your perspective, how do you think we go about getting people to see this as a problem to begin with? How do we get people to understand that there is a challenge here from the start to kind of motivate people to action?
Well, thank you. That's an excellent question. So in reading Colonel Bailey's paper, I was struck by the statistic that he presented in regards to the poll when asked in regards to the American people in their trust or faith in the government. And it's a question I actually ask my students fairly regularly when I get to the 1960s and 70s. I always ask my students, and I've been teaching for almost 10 years now, and I've taught at a variety of universities. Do you believe that the government has your best interest at heart? And overwhelmingly, over the past several years, 18, 19, 20-year-old students, none of them, no overwhelming majority said that they believe the government has their best interest at heart. And I think that a part of the reason why we can deal with and address this issue is the lack of accountability, and the lack of accountability that people visually see in regards to, you made a mistake, you lied, and there's a consequence for you lying. Colonel Bailey talks about at the beginning of his paper, this win at any cost mindset that has permeated throughout our society, and that is a major issue in regards to the fact that athletes, students, they cheat, and then when they get caught cheating, they don't really understand that there are repercussions. And so they somehow try to circumvent the fact that they were, got caught violating a code. And so holding people accountable and holding people to these standards in regards that have been set forth is I think is a major step forward that we can try to address this. Because right now, the way that everything is set up, win at any cost is very dominant in our culture.
Very, very well put. I want to take a question from the chat for a moment. How much do you think antiquated ideas of masculinity or toxic masculinity has played into slowing or opposing this need or focus on strong character or character development? Who would like to start on that
one? Okay, I'll go. Sure. I think that that is an excellent question, and I do believe that the ideology centering around toxic masculinity does play a huge part in pushing forth this idea of winning at any cost, and the idea that if they commit an action or that people are being too sensitive, right? If you feel like you try to correct someone for saying something they feel is inappropriate, and understanding that character, good character, goes beyond just, well, I've never done X, Y, Z, or I've never said X, Y, Z, but your actions demonstrate otherwise. Understanding that, right? And reflecting that. So, for example, the issues in regards to, say, where African Americans fall in promotion or where they get placed, like they oftentimes get pushed into transport, which does not lead to being able to move up in the ranks as quickly as if they would get actual combat duty. And so, yes, you may not say something that is, say, racially insensitive, but you participate in a system that would keep a particular group from moving up because you don't think they would fit into a leadership position. And so those kind of things fall into this toxic masculine identity that, people are like, oh, well, you're just being too sensitive and you're reading too much into it. And you're kind of like, well, not really. So that's my answer to that question.
Dr. Donaldson, thanks. Yeah, it's interesting when I read Nick's question. I don't know that I've seen the term antiquated ideas of masculinity before. And as I was reflecting on it, that resonates with me, because one of the things that I've become increasingly aware of over the last couple of years, after having some folks speak some hard truths to me about it, was the unnecessary gendering of a lot of what we do, of a lot of our terminology, that we put gender on a lot of things that frankly just don't need it. And you can say, oh, well, that's minor, it's not a big deal. Well, but if it's exclusionary, then it makes a difference, because if it's exclusionary, then you're telling people, well, you're not really part of this culture, or we tolerate you, or you're part of this. And so if you've got people that you are excluding from your culture, whether it's on the basis of gender, whether it's on the basis of ethnicity, sexual orientation, how can you possibly expect them to be part of the solutions that you are trying to promote and that you are trying to bring forward if you're excluding them in other areas. It just can't happen. So Nick, to your question, I think my answer would be yes. I think it's a significant problem, specifically when it puts forward an exclusionary tone and gets people and really keeps people from taking ownership of larger issues. Colonel Bailey, anything you want to add on this?
I would just say, yeah, anything that is, especially when you look at combat readiness and mission execution, some of those things that we focus on, anything that is divisive to that unity of command, unity of effort, that breaks down trust and the camaraderie that warriors should share on the battlefield and at home, is counterproductive, and we want, it's our shared values and our and going back to the oath that we take and the founding documents of this nation, that all men and women are created equal with unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that it's those values that make this nation great, that we want to amplify what brings us together for this common cause, and not amplify or reduce those things that divide us, because that's what the enemy wants. The enemy wants us to fall from within and be divided and ineffective in whatever mission we have.
Colonel Bailey, thanks. And Nick's follow-up comment in the chat that I want to make sure we capture, which is firsthand, I've seen it referring to antiquated ideas of masculinity or toxic masculinity. I've seen it hinder honest communication, which is the bridge for everything else. And yeah, Nick, I would agree wholeheartedly with that. Thank you for the question and the follow-up comment. Colonel Bailey, if I can throw another question to you, Dr. Donaldson talked about consequences of actions and the importance of seeing accountability of that. And you talked about dealing with that as a group commander. Understand absolutely you can't talk about specific cases, specific punishments, but can you just talk a bit about the thought process when you are holding someone accountable for a breach of character? Is one breach a game ender? Is that, hey, once and you're done? Is it a sliding scale? What's your kind of thought process in that respect?
Wow, that's an excellent question. Every situation obviously it has differences. Every person has differences. So one of the techniques, the most important techniques that I have for future or current commanders and leaders, is to not make decisions in a vacuum. And one of the best things that I did is I relied on my enlisted leadership. I relied on the JAG, the Inspector General, my chain of command, EO, and I would, for those wicked problems that we had, we would bring a round table together and kind of talk through it as a leadership team to make sure we gathered facts and evidence, and we knew the rules and the regulations, the law, and that to me was probably the best technique for navigating these messy waters, was bringing many the key experts involved into it and gathering as many facts before we rush to judgment. But the thing we would rush to is protecting the safety of any victims or alleged victims, and being very expeditious in our efforts to take seriously accusations and go through the process, a rigorous process of bringing into gathering the facts. But protection of that victim, particularly in a case of a sexual assault within an organization or something like that, is, I think, mission number one. And then it is dealing with the perpetrator and figuring out the facts involved there is mission number two.
Terrific. Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, when you talk about casting that that wide net, getting that variety of perspectives, it reminded me of something Dr. Donaldson said earlier in this talk, talking about civilian community uplift. So I would love to actually go back to that. Dr. Donaldson, can you talk about when you talk about community uplift, what kinds of resources, what kinds of things would you have in mind in that respect?
Well, so in looking at the past, some of the simple things in regards to community uplift was that the Black soldiers, for example, would go to the local high schools. They would organize the choirs. They would give music lessons. They would actively participate in parades. So for example, in a city like Washington, D.C., the high school cadet corps parades were huge gatherings and for the entire community, where people would get dressed up and they would come to and these cadet competitions went well into the 1980s, actually, where you have the African American DC National Guard. They're working with these high school students in regards to their cadet corps drills, and they're seeing this, and what you end up getting is, for example, Ben Davis Sr., he's a graduate and who was an active member of this high school cadet corps, the Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C., and he goes on to become the first American general. You have a generation of African American officers who actively participated in these high school cadet interactions, in which they performed for the whole community, and the community came and cheered them on, and little things like that. Or you have, like I was saying, people going into the community teaching, play the piano, teaching music. You have all those type of things. Nowadays, with the Black Veterans Projects, they actually are actively engaging with reading projects. So they are working with veterans and high school students in community reading, and engaging with conversations about these various topics. And so, these kinds of highly visible activities help to provide a very positive image in regards to the legacy and the character being taught to soldiers, that goes beyond them just being efficient in the field in regards to being efficient killers and warriors, but also being efficient community leaders, being efficient citizens, and understanding what that means. So that, I think those are some examples.
May I make a quick comment on that? I'm pulling it from memory. I was trying to double check my facts, but one of the stories I remember from Benjamin Davis Jr. was after World War II, he was put in command of an organization. I think it was the 32nd Expeditionary Operations Group, but not for sure if that was this command. But anyways, he and his airmen were not welcome in their community, and they were receiving a lot of persecution. And the Air Force at this time was was entertaining ideas of integration, and it was an isolated organization that he commanded of just Black airmen. But he was able to win the hearts and minds of the community and create an environment where they would put on shows, they would do things and host different community events. And the community ended up really embracing the unit and his leadership. And there was a lot of synergy that was developed through that. And he did similar things when he was in Korea in his command and connections with the Korean people. So that was kind of a tactic and technique that he used very effectively.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that hearing both of you talk about community engagement and community uplift brought to mind for me is a critique that sometimes comes out on character development, which is, hey, you're fighting 18, 21 years, whatever their childhood education was. You're fighting values and ideals that have been instilled in them in their most formative years. How can you possibly hope to compete with that? And so some of this is the nature versus nurture argument, right? Is character innate? Is it developed? I would love to hear thoughts from either or both of you on kind of where you come down on that argument, and specific things that you feel are potentially useful for counteracting negative character aspects that may have come into play as folks were growing up.
Okay, so I'll start first. I think that when we look at this, we're trying to deprogram a sociocentric thinking in regards to, you know, as a professor, I have to deal with this all the time. And one of the things that I always try to tell my students is that growth and learning is difficult. It may even, you know, this is why they call growing pains painful or whatever. It will be uncomfortable. And when looking at and really presenting in, you know, people with the facts in regards to, well, what you may have been taught was wrong, it is something that is, you know, I've seen it happen with students where they had to come to grips with learning the truth and whatnot, but it was helpful and they benefited from it. And so, you know, I try to, you know, as Ko, and as Colonel Bailey pointed out, you know, you're ever changing. And so growth is something that happens, you know, all the time. You don't stop growing, you don't stop learning. And so I think that it may present itself as initially as a challenge. However, if you come at it from a different mindset with, you know, you're here to, you know, I'm in a position where I'm here to teach and you're here to learn. And so this is a way to help broaden those horizons. And so you know, that's how I kind of approach it. Colonel Bailey, want to add?
Excellent. Thank you for that. I think people, in my experience, I think people can have transformative experiences. Unfortunately, that change their paradigm, the way they see things, and their mindset. Unfortunately, those sometimes are harder to come by, and a lot of it is just grinding through habit-changing efforts to improve or develop. And that's one of the reasons the data here at the Officer Training School that I've been told, and just as I'm learning my new responsibilities, that indicates if to make some of those changes, you need at least 8 weeks time to develop that amount of investment in forming new habits and change and doing adult learning. It takes concentrated amount of time based upon the research and the data that they've provided me. And that's one of the arguments that we need at least 8 weeks to develop officers of character. And we need to have that immersive environment where they're testing their character and their decision-making and their leadership on a continual basis to really evaluate and develop that.
Those are fantastic insights. And I think one additional one and I wholeheartedly concur with what both of you said. I think the other thing that I would add in there, in addition to the challenges, in addition to, you know, getting those opportunities, I think the other piece that's really critical is that there be an opportunity for reflection, right? That there be an opportunity for individuals who are confronting those challenges to character paradigms that are confronting things that they, as Dr. Donaldson put, that they were absolutely certain was true and now are suddenly discovering that are not. There has to be an opportunity for them to do some reflection, do some thinking, and really internalize that and say, well, okay, what now? What do I do now with this hard-won knowledge that I have gained? What do I do now with this inconvenient truth that is poking me in the eyeball? And so I think that is really crucial, that it can't just be challenge after challenge after challenge, fact after fact after fact, that there's got to be an opportunity for people to step back and really reflect and internalize and bring that in. So we have about—
May I make a comment on that?
Please.
Yeah, I think that reflection is critical. Totally agree. One of the books we read this year and studied, many here at Work College, and one of the electives I took was Immunity to Change: How to Overcome It, Unlock Potential in Yourself and Your Organization by Robert Keegan. And it hits that topic very effectively. And I thought his research was fascinating.
Very cool. That's a great suggestion. Thank you. So we have a little less than 5 minutes left in the panel. So I want to throw out one more question, which is for someone who would come to you and say, I'm trying to come to grips with a character problem in my organization. I'm trying to come to grips with how to tackle this, and it seems so enormous, and I just don't know where to start. What advice would you give them on just a single starting point, or the most important starting point, or just a way to get the ball rolling? And Colonel Bailey, let me lead off with you on this one.
Thank you. I think the first place that is always good to start as a leader is with the person in the mirror. And as a leader of an organization, we have a tremendous amount of influence on the culture, the identity, the trust within that organization. And the best place to start is, what am I doing that is either contributing to this problem or not dealing with this problem? And how do I assess my leadership style, my interaction, the culture that I am creating in this environment to help address this and resolve this concern? And I think that the next step is having the trust of key influencers within the organization. And most importantly for me, that's my senior enlisted advisors, others, key commanders within the organization. But sometimes there's that private or that airman that is a key influencer, or other people, the civilian that's been there a long time, that's a key influencer. So understanding who those key influences are and getting their perspective on how to address it.
Fantastic. Dr. Donaldson.
I think that Colonel Bailey perfectly summed it up. I don't have anything else to add to that. So I would like to echo and say ditto to everything that he just said. What about you, Colonel Kimball? What do you think?
For me, I would say find the stories in your organization, right? Find the stories that make your hair stand on end. Find the stories of people grappling with this challenge, because a single well-crafted story can convey the problem, can convey challenges in a way that reams of survey data just will fail to do. So find those great stories. Of course, tell them with the consent of the individual, right? You can't just rip somebody's story away from them. But a lot of times the people who have those really terrible stories want to see things change and are willing to work with that. I also want to point out Nick's comment in the chat: self-awareness with accountability. Nick, I think that's a powerful mixture. So thank you for sharing that. We are at our time for the panel. Again, I want to thank the fantastic members of this panel: Colonel K.O. Bailey, Dr. Latrice Donaldson. I'm Ray Kimball. We've really had a pleasure being with you today. And Joyce, let me hand the floor back to you, please.
All right. Thank you all so much. Ray, Latrice, KO, thank you so much for this presentation. So I'm going to ditto the wrap up and we'll be ready for our 2 o'clock panel in a few minutes. If you get there early, go ahead and read the paper, have a few questions. Of course, you can't read it, but you can scan through it a little and have some questions, and we'll see you on the next Zoom. Thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you.